Then we close this. Shall I close?
So, hello, good evening, everyone. Okay, welcome back to Digital Delights and Disturbances. I am Donatella Della Ratta, as you know, from the Communication and Media Studies Department, and I'm here to introduce the talk. Tonight, we are very honored, delighted to have Tatiana Bazzichelli joining us. So Tatiana is going to talk about female power and military whistleblowing, such an important and timely topic, and not by chance this topic is happening in this week, which is the week of March 8th, which is the week of a trans-feminist strike. So not by chance this choice was made carefully. It's a topic that very few people know about, so we're going to hear from Tatiana what's her take. She knows the topic very well. She has been researching this for many years. Tatiana is a long-time friend. We met actually here in Rome. We studied together. And then she went to Berlin and she co-founded and directed the Disruption Network Lab in Berlin, which is a hub of innovation, of critical discourse and thinking about technology, and also the Disruption Network Institute, which is a new project, and maybe she's going to talk about it later in the Q&A. So Tatiana is a former also curator of Transmediale. You might know Transmediale is a very important happening, a gathering when it comes to digital media and network critique. And she's also the author of seminal books about these topics. So we are very proud and happy to have her here. I'll leave the floor to her, and as you know, we will have a Q&A after our talk. Enjoy.
Thank you very much, Donatella. I'm very happy to be here and also to see that there is a nice audience in front of me. So I take the occasion to say hello to everyone and also to say hello to the public that is probably watching us on streaming as well. And it's very important for me to be in Rome because it's actually the city where I am from. Donatella just mentioned we met in the 90s at the University of Sociology, so it doesn't happen actually very often that I come to this city to speak, and I'm very glad also to speak about this very important topic that is female power and military whistleblowing. And so first I want to ask all of you, how do you feel today? Because I think that sometimes this question is never done. So yeah, people, yes, you. Great. So I think this is important because you know, sometimes there is always the link missing between who is speaking and the audience. And I want to start by saying that what I'm going to speak about today is something that is very, very close to my heart. And I will tell stories of people that inspired my life. These are people that I believe are important not only for me, but for the idea of producing social change. And are people that are also contributing with their action to reflect about the society we live in. And by the way, the discourse of whistleblowing is something that is pretty much male-dominated. So although there are also very important and courageous action of men that blew the whistle, today I want to focus on women because is a subject that many times is not considered as it should, and also there are stories of people that are not having the space they should have. And so I start by first of all telling a bit what I do. I run an organization in Berlin that is called Disruption Network Lab. And what we do is exposing systems of power and injustice. This idea of exposing systems of power and injustice comes from the concept of disruption. That is a concept I've been working on for a very long time. And the idea of disruption means to try to find inside system action, activities, thoughts that are trying to stretch the logic of these systems and at the same time are trying to change the system from within. And so the Disruption Network Lab is an organization that creates conferences, that creates events, and at the same time is also an organization that I have been founding with people that have been also doing a very important work since time in Berlin, and so we have been together then developing a subject that is related to social change. So we start with the idea of whistleblowing, and now I want to turn the answer a bit to the audience. What does whistleblowing mean? I would like to ask the audience who knows this word, whistleblowing. Can you raise your hands? Oh, wow, many people. Very happy about, because whistleblowing are people that are doing a very important work in society, are people that are trying to change society from within. And many of these people are people that have been working inside a closed system. So maybe since many of you know what is a whistleblower, this introduction is not necessary, but not so many people know that actually whistleblowing is a practice that goes from somebody that is working in a very normal job, that you, for example, witness forms of corruption or forms of wrongdoing, something that in your normal life you think, okay, this doesn't work as it should. And most of the case, whistleblowers are people that are going to speak with the superior, and they try first to change the things internally. But often this doesn't work as it should, so often people that try to create this change from within are also people that found in front of them a really big wall, and then they decide to go public. They decide to speak with the press, for example. They decide to speak with people that are also running normally organizations that do whistleblowing protection. And, but at the same time, we have also whistleblowers that are coming from very different fields. So, for example, there is the field of national security, and many people know a whistleblower that is pretty famous, Edward Snowden. He blew the whistle as part of somebody working inside the National Security Agency. And then we have whistleblowers that are part of other situations that are also often pretty close to the public, like the military. So there are really a lot of different kinds of whistleblowers, so people that try to change society for the good of it. And most of the case, these are people that are then persecuted, oppressed, because theoretically what the law says is that they are doing something illegal. But most of the case, these are also people that are trying to do something that should be done, and people that are trying to change society for the better. So I want really to stress this fact that whistleblowers are people that go through a really big oppression, but the main force that is inspiring them is also to do something for the social and for the goods of all of us. So saying that, I want to start with a case that perhaps many of you know. This is also something that helps me a lot to explain what whistleblowing is. This photo that you can see is something I took from the Khe San Mai base in Vietnam, because there is a really interesting museum at the demilitarized zone that is an area in Vietnam between the north and south that shows the history of this marine unit that was working theoretically to protect the civilians in the area. But as you can see on the shirt of this, on the jacket of this Marine, there is already something that is probably not going as it should, because he speaks about the fact that being in this Quesan Bay base could be harmful to your health. And so this brings me to something very important, because this specific base also shows something that was going on in Vietnam. Of course, not only this place, but it's quite interesting to visit these sites, because in this museum you can see also the perspective from the military side, and also there are many interesting tools about technology, for example, the way already the US Army was using systems of surveillance in Vietnam. Very interesting. But what is striking is also, at least in my opinion, photos like this one. And there is a person that was working on specifically this situation in Vietnam, that was supposed to write a report, and by writing this report from the US point of view, he discovered that a lot of things happening in Vietnam were not working as they should. So, for example, there was bombing of Laos and Cambodia that the media didn't know. And there were also the situation that the Marines unit were used to create attacks rather than instead protecting the civilians, as the media were saying. And this person was Daniel Ellsberg. He's very famous because he's the person that released this information that he was working on this report at the New York Times. And this leak happened in 1971. And here I had really the wonderful fortune to meet Daniel Ellsberg when we went to visit him close to San Francisco. Unfortunately, Daniel Ellsberg now is dead, and is a person that really left a long legacy in the field of whistleblowing, also because he has been not the first, but for sure the first person that created a wide impact on the media. And thanks to him, also the audience, the public, could know what was really happening in the Vietnam War, and contributed also to the end of this war. So we really have to thank him for this act of courage, also because he was then charged under the Espionage Act, that is also very draconian charge that many whistleblowers face. But then the case was dismissed because the Watergate scandal happened, and then Nixon had really other problems. So in a sense, fortunately, he didn't end up in prison for many years, as often happened with whistleblowers that want to blow the whistle. So although I wanted to speak about female whistleblowers, I thought that was important to give this first example, because it has been a source of inspiration for all of us, and has been one of the first. And is also ideal to have a sense of what whistleblowing is and the impact of it. So here, then I ask myself, what does film and power have to do with military whistleblowing? And if we think about the discourse of the struggle of women in terms of dismantling power structures that are oppressing, that is also a big part of the roots of feminism, then we can think that there is an interesting correlation with whistleblowing, because whistleblowers are also people that are trying to dismantle power structure, not because they necessarily don't believe in them, but because they witness that these power structures are wrong. And this is very important to say, because for me it has been very revelatory to meet whistleblowers. Sometimes they also are working in this field because they believe that something can be done also from the power side. But then they realize that this power is completely wrong, is corrupted, is abusing, and so they lose completely faith in power, and they decide to speak out. And I think this activity that is very important of changing opinion and to realize that power is something that can be changed because you want to go against abuses, forms of oppression, you want to turn the rules of power around, is also something that many women have been doing in history. And so today I also want to speak about them. And interesting enough also, whistleblowing has been oppressed as a practice since the start. These are very peculiar posters of propaganda that were circulating during the World War II, in which there was a clear obsession against the presence of spies all over. And the idea was to try to be very careful to speak up also as part of the civic society. And as we can see, if you would notice something, it's better you don't say anything, because actually you could even sink ships. And or you could create something that would harm your own army. But this is also very interesting because it's already showing how a certain culture was becoming part of power, that you should not speak because this could create consequences that are going to be bad for all of us. And even you could create people that, you know, die or something happen that could be very strong. Also this, you know, is pretty much indicative, the idea that what you know you keep for yourself. Here you can read that careless talk costs lives, but I mean, how many times also in our life we heard this sentence? In Italy there is even this sentence of the dirty wash, you have to wash at home, and in a sense is also pretty much what is saying this. You should not speak because this could create something bad. But doesn't mean that this is exactly what should be done. And I spoke directly with a very great woman that inspired my life a lot. She is Lisa Ling, that is a former technical surgeon of the US Air Force drone surveillance program. And I will speak also about her later because she's one of the stories I would like to bring to you. But as you can see from the quote, she is basically saying that in the field of military, it's very rare that women are chosen for high-level leadership role. And they are often also segregated with this idea that somehow they should be protected because in the military there is pretty much the concept of the strong man, this kind of boys club that can do certain work. Could be, for example, in infantry, they could be in certain kind of units. So the woman is from one side protected, but from the other, this protection means that she cannot get key roles. So that also would allow her to do a certain job and to access information that are sensitive. And at the same time, we see that women are excluded in this kind of position to information that then could reveal inner structure of what is happening. And this has been pretty much the history also of the presence in the military. And today, I don't know if you read the last news that are quite insane. There is also something in action to expel from the military people that showed in the past they have form of gender diaspora. That's, this is something that is completely absurd, because also how are you going to demonstrate that? So right now, when Trump started to be in power, they are basically dismissing trans people in the military, But even more, there are these missing people that show sign of not being completely straight. So tell me, how are you going to demonstrate this? And I find it pretty crazy also as a form of discrimination that is happening right now inside the military. But going back to our topic, then let's start now to present the stories of this female that have been inspiring also my life. And I have to say, many of them I got to know personally, so a big part of my work is also about creating networks of trust with them and events that we have been doing together, discussion that we have been doing together. And I think it's very difficult to understand the subject of whistleblowing without actually speaking about these single people, because also whistleblowing, especially in US, for most of the cases, is also an act of a single individual that doesn't have any other choice than to speak up. So I want to speak first about the one that probably many of you know, Chelsea Manning. And Chelsea Manning is also a very special case because she started the military as a man, but then she transitioned into a woman during the time in which she was in prison, although she always also said that she was feeling to be a female. So I found her story very striking and important because there is a double act of courage that she did. Not only the one of blowing the whistle, but also the one to having the courage to transition into an environment, as part of an environment that was very, very difficult, as the one of being in prison, for example. But interesting enough, we have to say, this is also something I was discussing with Lisa, that at the beginning of her career, being a man, she also had the possibility to access certain information that not all the people would access. In fact, she was an intelligence analyst, and she was working as part of this unit, and she witnessed very deep and absurd situation, like clear war crime that were happening inside the military, because initially she started as a soldier, and she was an intelligent analyst, so she had access to certain information, and for example she could witness through a video on something like this. And this is very famous piece of evidence. It's called the collateral murder video that depicts airstrike in Baghdad that happened in July 2007, in which civilians were killed, including also 2 Reuters journalists. And so this is clearly something that people should have known, because shows that many times in this kind of wars there are mistakes that are happening, especially also when you are based your war on technologies that not often is so reliable. And although people also say that thanks to the drone war there could be more precision to kill people, whistleblowers have demonstrated that this is exactly the opposite, because you relied on information that are not on site, that you see from a distance in a base in Nevada, for example, and there you have to judge entirely a situation and decide if a person should be killed or not. And in this case, although it was not a drone, happened that civilians were killed. And Chelsea Manning was able to reveal very important information that has been called the Iraq war logs and the Afghan diary, together also the collateral murder video, that's have been then very important to understand what was actually happening in Afghanistan and in Iraq. Then she was unfortunately disclosed by a person that she trusted, and she was arrested in 2010, and she was then in prison until 2017. although she was charged under the Espionage Act again, and she actually got a charge of 35 years. Then she was commuted by Barack Obama, and then she was finally free. But her work has been very important because she was able to denounce these war crimes by also making leaks of around 750,000 documents to WikiLeaks. And indeed, WikiLeaks is a very important source for this kind of activity, because they have been working with people that were able to denounce crime on different levels, from not only war, but also cybersecurity, economy, etc. So the wide spectrum of the work and leaks of WikiLeaks is pretty huge. And for sure, Chelsea Manning contributed a big part of it. And of course, so for WikiLeaks, the person that is always mentioned, everyone knows, is Julian Assange. But instead, there are important acts of women that has been done inside WikiLeaks that not so many people speak about. So I want to mention them. For example, Sarah Harrison, that has been very important in the case of Edward Snowden, when he was revealing the mass surveillance from the National Security Agency. And she is the person that was escorting him in Hong Kong, that she was able to stay with him at the airport and then allowed him to reach Russia. Then we will speak a bit more about Edward Snowden, but otherwise, Renata Avila, that is also a person that is not well known for many. She has been working in the early times of WikiLeaks, also supporting the cause as a lawyer. When Julian Assange was stuck inside the Ecuadorian embassy, she was helping also the situation to speak with politicians, making diplomacy, and making a great supervision of the case from the legal side. And then, of course, Stella Assange, that is the wife of Julian Assange, that she has been a very important person to also contribute to the freedom of Assange since when he started to be in prison in Belmarsh in the UK. And I would say a big part of the fact that Assange was freed is also thanks to our very persistent work that has been constantly speaking with the media, constantly on press and in all the situation to denounce what was happening to him and to fight for the freedom of information and freedom of the press. And here we also enter specifically into the case of the military in the context of the US drone war. And I really suggest you to watch this film. Now I will speak also more deeply about it. It's a film by Sonia Kennebeck. She's a great film director that in 2016, she realized this film that is called National Bird. And this film is the personal stories of some people that were part of the US drone program on different levels. And then through this film, we're able to denounce what was happening inside the US drone program. And one that we really have to praise for her courage is Heather Linebaugh. Heather has been the first person as a woman in this unit that was able to speak about what was happening. And she was an imagery analyst in Iraq, working on Iraq and Afghanistan, and she served between 2009 and 2012. And in 2013, she published through Guardian an article. I mean, the Guardian was mentioning what she told them, that human rights abuses were happening inside this program by the fact that civilians were killed, that they should have not been killed, and that drones technology was creating a lot of mistakes. And the film is pretty touching because also this is a component that we need to realize. this moment in which the people speak out is also something that is going to interfere with their life deeply. And is a life already that, of course, in the film is clear that the people that suffer the most are the victim in Afghanistan, but also the people that are on the other side, mostly very young people that are put into the US drone program to work as, for example, sensor operators or imagery analysts. They are constantly in the context of war at a distance in which people are killed for real, and you are part of this, and you are complicit. And at the same time, in the film is clear she's suffering of heavy PTSD, and she has to deal with that. So this is something very important to consider of people that bring this with their own life, and then speaking out has also an impact in their own life. And another person that I already mentioned before is Lisa Ling, that also became very close to me because we have been working together. Then I will explain more on what, especially also on the discourse of AI and warfare. But Lisa is a former technical surgeon that was initially a nurse in the 90s. And she has been also working on the US drone program by, at the same time, trying to inform then later, when she left the military, the people of what is going inside. Very important to say that both Heather and Lisa never revealed classified information. So this is also a very technical difference. If you want, they should not be called whistleblowers. They are more like truth tellers, but sometimes the things are merged. But theoretically, whistleblower is a person that disclose classified information. That is not their case. But still, sometimes it's also smart not to do, because then you end up in prison. You can still say things, although they are not classified, but you do an act of courage to speak with the audience and with the public. And she was, thanks to her technical skills, then deployed in the combat communication unit. And in the film, then she is going back to Afghanistan to see the effects of her work. And so there are moments also that are pretty touching. Another person that is another protagonist of a film of Sonia Kennebeck is Reality Winner. This you see the poster of the last film of Sonia that is indeed called Reality Winner. Before was called United States versus Reality Winner, but then she did a new version of the film having reality inside. And she was also working at the US Air Force and as an NSA translator, especially her act of whistleblowing happened in 2000, like when she was working as part of the NSA as translator, and she got to see a report, an intelligence report that was showing the interference of Russia into the 2016 elections. And then she decides to blow the whistle in 2016. And because she thought this was not only an act of courage, but also an act of moral responsibility, but instead she was then unfortunately disclosed for that, because also her information were not really handled in the way that should have been done by the Intercept. And between 2017 and 2021, then she ended up in prison. And here we invited her at the Disruption Lab in one of our conferences. Was a very important moment also because she just came out of prison and she decided, it was November 2021, to give a public talk to our people in Berlin. And the person that you see close to her is her mother, that is Billy Winner Davis. The mother is also a very important person in all this story because she was responsible of a lot of support that reality got during the time in which she was in prison. She created a lot of campaign like Stand with Reality. She went on Twitter. She started to tweet a lot about reality. She started really to be engaged as much as a mother could do in a way she never did before, to advocate for the daughter. And also was very important for me to meet Billy and to hear her perspective as a mother that suddenly discovered what the daughter was doing, because of course working inside these systems you cannot actually say what you are doing, but then she got to know when reality blew the whistle. And then she really started to change her life. She was working before in the social service, and she became basically an advocacy person to help the daughter in prison. And she is also the author of a piece in the book that we publish at Disruption Lab that is called Whistleblowing for Change. So it's actually the first paragraph, the first chapter we have in the book. I thought that was very important to start with that, because also shows that creating this situation of networks of trust is pretty much part of whistleblowing, is part of these kind of situations, and is very powerful and important. So you can also read her perspective as a mother. And this is Sonia Kennebeck, that I've been mentioning her several times, the authors of the film National Bird, Reality Winner, and she did a lot of other great films that I also suggest you to watch. You can watch them because they are on streaming as well. You can, pay and buy them and get them. And I really have to tell you, watch her films because they are works of art. And so this connects with a person that probably many of you know, because she has been pretty famous in the media, in the press, and she is the winner of an Oscar as well. Her name is Laura Poitras, and she is well known especially for the film Citizen4 that she did for and about Edward Snowden, especially being the person that Edward Snowden contacted first together with Glenn Greenwald when he decided that it was the moment to blow the whistle as being an NSA contractor, and deciding that was time that the world would know about the US mass surveillance program. So Laura actually did 3 films, so Citizen4, more than 3, but I want to speak about specifically this trilogy. Citizen4 is the last of them, but other 2 that also not so many people mention that came before. It's also very important to understand what is behind her work, the way she works, that is also a person that follows personal stories in a really wonderful way. So a film is called My Country, My Country, that she shot in 2006 in Iraq, in which she was also following a family there. And so this film created a lot of problem for her because she was put in a terrorist watch list. And suddenly, all the time that she was going to airports, was traveling, also for her work, she was detained, was interrogated, had really a heavy oppression from the US government, until then she was able to fight back and be put out of this terrorist watch list. But another very important film that she did was called The Hots, that's happened a few years later about Yemen, in which she was then following the story of Osama bin Laden bodyguard. And in this film also you can see the perspective of a person that is also really working on the territory. Till then, Citizen4, that is a film that premiered in 2014 and then got the Oscar. And he's telling the story of Snowden that's also is still stuck in Russia after that. He is not able to go back to US because he's also under the Espionage Act list. So he's a person that would be extradited to US if would reach other countries that are also impossible almost to know which ones. And so he decides, he decided he didn't have any other choice. So from Hong Kong, he went to Russia, and he's still stuck there. He first asked asylum, and then he got also citizenship, but he has not been pardoned, in a sense, although he was never convicted, or he was never really put in prison, but the situation is quite of a gray zone, because we know that if he would go out of Russia, he would be probably arrested. So it's one of these life in the limbo of a person that wanted to speak out. And Laura in her film depicted this pretty well. There is also the personal story of him, really of the moment in which a person decides to speak with the press. And this brings to a reflection that was done by another person that I got to know working in UK in the military field there. Her name is Annie Machon, and she wrote in the book I just mentioned, Whistleblowing for Change, that whistleblowers are the regulators of the last resort. So this means that very interesting, if you reflect about the act of whistleblowing, this is something that is really the last resort, because if there would be a society that is trying to hear from people what is not working, the idea that you want to change something, then you would not need a whistleblower. So these people are actually acting because there is no other choice, and then comes the persecution. It doesn't happen only with whistleblowers, happen with a lot of people in general that in very different situations try to speak out. But in the case of the whistleblowers, it's pretty emblematic of this act, and this brings us back to this poster of propaganda that actually you are told you should not speak out. And then when you do as an act of disobedience, of courage, in which you want to create a change, but also you know that you are going to sacrifice your own life. And in the case of Annie Machon, she was working at the MI5, that is the military intelligence unit number 5 in UK. Important to say also that UK has a very interesting history of women whistleblowers. If we think about Catherine Gunn, that she has been a young whistleblower back at the time when she was working at the GCHQ, that is the equivalent of the NSA in the UK. There is also a film about Catherine Gunn, if you want to watch it, interesting, to understand also what a whistleblower goes through when decide to blow the whistle and all the persecution that happens. And Annie Machon also is not officially, if you want, a whistleblower, because she was working in the MI5 in the 90s, and she helped her partner, that was David Shaler, to blow the whistle. So he was technically the whistleblowers that was speaking about misconduct of the MI5. So the fact also that they were deployed in some sectors of MI5 in which they were surveilling both extremists from the right and from the left, also the IRA. And they also mentioned some bombs went up that could be prevented. The MI5 knew, and they did nothing to stop it. So it was also a really important testimonial at the time. So we are speaking about the 90s. And after David blew the whistle, they also went on the run for some time. At the end, Annie kept working on the subject by writing books, denouncing misconducts and abuses, but never also publishing classified information. So in a sense, she has been another one that understood also how to navigate herself into this kind of field. And here is the book that I've been mentioning many times. It's an anthology we published in 2021 at the Disruption Network Lab. I want to show you there are different chapters that you could get. I'm not doing self-promotion because the book also exists on open access. Actually, we had some cards that we forgot to put on the table, but we can do after I finish. So you can get the card and download the book. The book is structured on different chapters that have to do also with personal stories of these people. So I asked them to write their own stories by making people understand how whistleblowing creates change. And interestingly enough, the idea of creating change with this kind of mindset doesn't belong only to whistleblowers, but could belong to artists, for example, that do art as evidence. So they use art as a form of evidence of misconducts and wrongdoing and denouncing human rights abuses, or could happen through activism, through investigative journalism. So I combined these different perspectives because I also felt that you can never understand the subject if you only see it from one side. You have always to be polyphonic in a sense. So the whole book is about these different voices that combine the idea of creating a change from within systems and on systems that should be stretched to create something new. And the important aspect also that I want to stress is the idea of building networks of trust. That is important on whistleblowing, especially before blowing the whistle, but also after. Because before blowing the whistle, people, first of all, should know what they are going to do. They should be informed that this brings really heavy and deep consequence to their lives, most of the case also prison. And they need to understand also, perhaps to speak with a lawyer, with organizations that do whistleblowing protections. There are many in Europe and in the US. And at the same time understand that sometimes it's better not really to do this alone, to identify people, to be anonymous, to perhaps use tools that are anonymous. Global Leaks is a very important organization, also active in Italy, that creates tools for anonymizing whistleblowing. And after blowing the whistle, is even more important to understand that network of trust are crucial also to create your own life in a certain way. Like after you do, what is the networks of trust that you can believe? As I say, I mention often Lisa Ling. This is very important also for a network of trust among the people that came out of the US drone program, and many of them blew the whistle, like Daniel Hale, to be sure that these people have a sort of emotional support and check on them, being friends with them, because many of them are actually very young. We speak about 26-year-olds. We are literally speaking about kids that go to war on the side of the US drone program. And saying that, the Disruption Lab, we recently, actually in 2023, it's not so recent anymore, founded the Disruption Network Institute that is really based on these networks of trust. Initially, actually, was an intuition that Lisa Ling had, because she came to the Disruption Network Lab several times as a speaker, and we did many conferences about AI and warfare, in which she was also invited. And then we realized that actually we were creating a network of trust of people around this subject, people that could understand AI, the way also AI is now deployed more and more on warfare. So a lot of the technology we are normally using, all these buzz around AI, has a really strong implication on warfare. And in Gaza, we saw it. basically the war in Gaza was really the war in which AI was tested on people and to kill them by creating this kill list, often also even based on probability, so in the fact that you are not even sure if you are getting your target. So this is very important to say, that there is always this margin of mistake, especially big debate as also about the responsibility of the human in the loop, and still, even if there is the human of the loop, turn out for pretty much that everything is so fast in the moment that there is not even the time actually to understand if you are killing the right people or not. So there is a lot of misconduct. And during this investigation and research we did at the Disruption Network Institute, many of these aspects came out. We involved for 15 months 4 researchers. 2 are whistleblowers. One is Lisa, that you can see on top left. On top right, there is Jack Paulson, that is also a very interesting whistleblower. He was working at Google before in the AI research unit. And then he founded Tech Inquiry. He left Google also because he understood exactly what they were doing, especially also in the context of Project Maven, that is a project in which there was this correlation between Google and the military and the intelligence. And many people at Google, if you Google actually Project Maven, you will see that there was an internal protest of people. And so he created Tech Inquiry, that is a very interesting website. Also, I suggest you to check. He does very, very deep investigation. And specifically for the Disruption Network Institute, he was mapping the relationship between contractors, like private contractors, and the military, and understand actually a lot of companies that we think are theoretically non-offensive are actually working with the military. And also he does a very interesting research on public spending, how much also of this public spending is used for situation and occasion they should not be used for, including the military. And he created a very great report for us. On the down right, Naomi Colvin, she's a whistleblower advocate, that she reported on the discourse of lethal autonomous weapon in the UK. And finally, in the down left, Joanna Moll, that is a very interesting artist that has been working since also a long time on the role of the users in the technology we normally use, and the fact that for example, ad tech, that is the advertisement technology, is constantly monitoring, targeting, and surveilling people. And by this affirmation, then she creates really great artworks that are demonstrating that. So she works a lot with art as evidence. And for us, she wrote this piece that I also suggest you to read. There are QR code in which you can download the papers we created that is called Cookies at War. And she is also demonstrating that even the mobile phone we are normally using, they are structured in a way that the information is weaponized. So the fact that you are embedded in this kind of interface that is also used to track, surveil, and monitor you, and is done also in the way it's constructed, that has an effect on the body. So she also did a lot of workshops with a choreographer, with students, by showing that when you are really in the world of your smartphone, your body has a reaction that allows you to enter into this kind of world by also having a physical feedback that makes you also lose a lot of attention from around the world. And so in this analysis, she also connects this with the idea of increased weaponization of technology and how these things are correlated. So I also suggest you to read. And so in the work we are doing now, we are trying to connect these aspects also to produce contents that could be useful for conferences we do. So we invited them, our researcher, in November last year to speak publicly about the results of their investigation. And at the same time, we brought them together again with investigative journalists, with researchers, with other artists, with whistleblowers. We also invited Thomas Drake, that is an NSA whistleblower, to discuss the subject of AI and warfare. And with that, I conclude, and I also suggest you to check our website, that is disruptionlab.org, in which you can find a really huge archive of all our conferences that are not only about whistleblowing and warfare. We speak a lot about exposing systems of power and injustice on different levels, since today we are also speaking about the subject of film and power and whistleblowing. We are also working a lot on the discourse of gender, technology, and dismantling power. There is a conference that is called Transitioning, in which we were working on the subject together with many people that were currently doing transition, and also understanding from the side of the media what is the impact of that, how they live their personal lives through their work that happens in very different domain, by also being inspired by a great performer that is Diane Thor, that also died some years ago, and she left also a big legacy on this kind of subject. But now I would like to open to the question, and thank you very much. Otherwise, I can give mine, and I could stay there.
Yeah, no, maybe use this because I need this for the floor. Okay, I guess, well, thank you so much for this inspiring overview over the topic of female power and military whistleblowing. I guess as I was watching your presentation, I had this question in mind, which I would like to ask you. Which is like you have mentioned, like figures like Snowden, of course, Manning, Assange, Reality Winner, and these are all people who actually did their acts of whistleblowing the previous decade, right? So before 2020. I was kind of struck when I saw also the slide in which you were mentioning collateral murder, which is the video, the film that through which Chelsea Manning exposed the killing of civilians in Iraq. And as I was watching it, I was wondering, how many things have changed now that killing civilians is no longer a taboo, and you do not need the whistleblower, because people are in the IDF, many soldiers are killing people in Gaza in cold blood, and even dancing on it on TikTok. So I was just wondering, how do you think that whistleblowing has been changing in the past, in this new second decade of the 21st century? Because it seems to me that these figures were very connected to the beginning of an era, which is the first decade of the 2000s, and now we are facing completely different challenges when it comes to blowing the whistle. So, yeah.
working, because our people also that were doing blowing the whistle is true in a special.
Sorry, I think you should talk with this because I'm just told that this doesn't work for the streaming.
Ah, okay. So then I repeat everything. Concise. Okay, but your question was heard. Okay. No, so I'm saying that, like a summary, there are some whistleblowers that are still part of this wave, if we think about the fact that Julian Assange just came out of prison recently, Daniel Hale came out of prison in May, and Snowden is still stuck in Russia. But yeah, of course, the crime of war are becoming much more evident and pervasive. What happened in Gaza was really an example of it. But there are different levels of being able to speak out. So I say also what Annie Machon was writing, the whistleblowers are the regulator of the last resort. It's not that we necessarily always only need whistleblowers to speak out. And in our program at the Disruption Lab, we recently invited Marwa Fatafta. She's working at Access Now. She's not a whistleblower, but she is a Palestinian woman that has a really wonderful capacity to explain to an audience how AI has been used to kill people in Gaza. And so there is the idea that information could be told in very different levels, from the one blowing the whistle, from the investigative journalist, from the activists, from the human rights defenders. And all these people have to contribute to a cause. And it's very important to say the whistleblowers are the regulator of the last resource if the civic society is not speaking. So I think now there is the fact that this war in Gaza was so evident that many people try to denounce it, but doesn't mean that the persecution is not happening, and even the silence of the media. I mean, I live in Germany, and this is a very interesting discussion how much the media have been reporting about the war in Gaza and the problematic about that. So maybe now we have to start entering another domain and also discuss what is the effect of whistleblowing, what is the role of media? Are they actually telling the things? Because if the media would speak, maybe you don't constantly need this person that is immolating himself, herself, themselves just to tell the truth. So maybe it's more about that we have to start discussing. What is the role of media in the current war, and also how could you create an information that is scientific, that is going back to sources, that is really mapping. I mean, in Gaza, the media could not even enter. So that is another problem.
Sorry, we have to move around with the mic. Questions from the audience? Yeah.
Hi, I'm just curious to learn about why you got interested in this topic.
Okay, so we have just one mic. Yes, actually, thank you, because I mean, sometimes this is also a very personal thing. I always speak about the personal stories of others that I believe are much more important than me, but I also feel that maybe this could serve as an inspiration. And that all started also thanks to networks of trust, because as I say, I'm based in Berlin, and was a very interesting time back in 2012, 2013, because many people working on the subject were reuniting themselves in this city. Also because was allowing a certain level of security in terms of not having the depth of surveillance that you would find in US. And so, for example, we had Laura Poitras moving to Berlin, and thanks to a common friend, that is Jake Applebaum, I had the possibility to get in contact with her. And thanks also to her, I got in contact to other people. And thanks to another person that is doing also very important work from the Italian perspective and also on the war in Gaza is Chantal Meloni, that she's working at the ECCHR in Berlin, but she's also doing very important legal litigation on the Sigonella air base that is in Italy. She put me in contact with a person that knew Brandon Bryant, that was the first person we ever invited at the Disruption Network Club as keynote, and Brandon Bryant has been the first US drone whistleblower. He was a sensor operator in the US drone war. With Laura, we created a panel together at Trasmediale Festival that was called Art as Evidence. And then I started to work on the idea of artistic practice as a form of evidence, because also I come from that background. I've been working a lot on hacker culture, art, activism since the 90s. And of course, this was very interesting for me. And I felt, wow, you know, since I've been also mapping a lot the discussion of disruption, that is the idea of interference with systems from within, I felt this idea of art as evidence really connects well, and then connects with whistleblowing, that is also a form of disruption from within. So then I started to map up all these people, because also, you know, I've been working on networking as an artistic practice since many decades. And I started then to enter in contact with many whistleblowers. And in a sense, you become part of a little family of trust in which people know each other. And then you invite one, then you discover, oh, but there is also this other one that people should know. And then we started to invite them first at Transmediale, then at the Disruption Lab. And at the end, we really created all together these networks of trust. So I became interested in the subject also because I became interested in people and the people that are doing these things, and became also a friendship. So we are all friends in a sense. And it's very important. I don't stress this because, you know, just as a personal part of my life, but because this aspect of friendship is also something that is moving in the field to get in contact with people that then have a certain mindset to produce a certain way of changing things. And so, yeah, I mean, if I have to be also very honest, I would have never imagined, also coming from more the activist background, that I would become friends with the military whistleblower, so a person that before was working the US Air Force as a military person, actually also killing people. If you think about these two things are like the opposite, but then meeting these people, you feel, oh, actually, although we would be enemies from the past, now we are fighting for the same objective. So we have a mindset that's strangely connected, and I find it really fantastic. And then this would create a lot of reflection by, you know, how much this mindset of connection is important, but is actually the case. So network of trust is really a big part of it. And also I have to say that among all these people that I knew is pretty much related to the women whistleblowers also see the subject. Because they tend not to be isolated, but actually to connect with other people, as usually women do much better than men. Sorry, maybe I have to say something that is not really politically correct, but it's true. I mean, also interesting to think many men actually act in the whistleblowing field alone, and then, you know, are totally persecuted. Instead, many women I met in this field also are trying to create networks, and also involving men, of course. So this drive of creating networks is also something very close to perhaps this idea of dismantling power and creating more structures that are at least trying to be horizontal.
Sorry, we have just one mic tonight. Any other question? Yes.
Thank you so much for visiting. I wanted to ask a question about civic engagement. I'll give some context. The notion of public interest, right, in terms of a loophole that will allow freedom of expression against the Espionage Act. So when you mentioned the Vietnam and the Pentagon Papers, the Supreme Court of Justice ruled in favor of the Times and the Washington Post because it was in the public interest. It was in the right of the people to know what was happening in Vietnam. And going back to what Donatella is also saying, in our times, I find that what is public interest? Many Americans re-interviewed as a vox pop in the States didn't know what Edward Snowden revealed or Chelsea Manning. So I'm kind of questioning in our time, what can activism and art do? Or if you have talked to whistleblowers about this, how could we keep government and other companies accountable if even after whistleblowers compromise their lives, we're not seeing that ripple effect? You may recall Frances Haugen, the data scientist who blew a whistle against Meta and Facebook. She revealed documents about Facebook weaponizing algorithms to profit, about eating disorders and young teenage women being targeted. So she spoke to Supreme Courts of Justice, and then the media did little coverage, nothing happened. So I'm kind of at that point as well where we're revisiting these notions of what is public interest, civic engagement, and I don't know, I still find a lot of hope in art and activism to sort of move people forward, but do you have any conversations about this with whistleblowers, or what do you think as a, sorry, it was a, I'm venting a little bit, but.
I mean, honestly, this is what I try to do every single hour of my life. I believe that, yes, these stories that I just say are an act of courage against really huge powers. You know, the power is becoming also much and much bigger. And now the power that many of these people were denouncing is usually, I mean, is even institutionalized. So, you know, let's see what will happen in the next 5 years. You know, what we are witnessing at the moment require also an act of responsibility and keep denouncing certain behaviors. And what we also discussed with the whistleblowers that, of course, and I hope also came through this talk, is a work that could not be done only by one single person, but needs the civic society. And what the people have to do, at least what we are trying to do, is to connect different point of view with different experts, because, for example, by combining the work of a whistleblower with an artist, it's very interesting because they come from very different backgrounds, but then they connect very strongly on the idea of changing something. And then an artist is also able to reach an audience that a whistleblower would never reach, because you can do with an artwork that goes into a museum, that goes also in a completely different target audience. So our experience at the Disruption Network Institute is, for example, Joanna Moll, this artist from Spain, she got very much in contact with Thomas Drake, this NSA whistleblower that was part of our advisory board. And he gave her a lot of advice also in terms of developing her artwork, the same Lisa Ling. And so you feel we really need to create these networks of knowledge and keep as our objective the one to produce literacy. That is pretty much also what you do here at the university. That is the work of an artist that could do art as evidence, or a whistleblower, or an investigative journalist. And I think this needs the constant pressure of all of us that ask for evidence. Because also now people in power thinking about, you know, Donald Trump. This is a completely another way of feeling and dealing with information that is absolutely not working on evidence. So there is a way to dismantle this mechanism, you know, this kind of vortex of chaos, of so-called transgression that is instead pretty conservative. So transgression masqueraded by no, conservatism masqueraded by transgression that is still based on certain power dynamics and hierarchy. And then the answer from us is, okay, let's see the facts and really strike for a certain kind of information. I hope also that in the newspaper, investigative journalists would get more money, because they are always the one that never get so much funding, while instead now we need these people. Also filmmakers, like I learn a lot of things through the films of Laura Poitras, Sonia Kennenbeck. So our battle should be also to not only, you know, go on street and protest, that is still important, but also try to demonstrate that there should be more support also for people that are trying to create this evidence on different fields, from filmmaking, from investigatory activities, in open source intelligence, artists, and I think it's a collective form of responsibility.
Thank you, Tatiana. I do feel that this is a perfect ending note, and thank you for emphasizing that every act of courage is a collective act, and we all bear responsibility. So we should never give up, but we should take it as a serious responsibility that pertains all of us, not just these people that Tatiana has been talking about. So thank you once again for being here. Thank you for coming. And we will reconvene on March 19. Speaking of courageous acts and activism, we have a stellar artist coming from New York City. Her name is Molly Crabapple, and we are doing this in cooperation with the Horizon lecture series with the Frank Guarini Business School, talking about art and creativity on the front line. So please be here on March 19, and have a good evening.